Tragedy strikes the LSU football program as Kyren Lacy has died at the age of 24. We'll tell you what we know. It's Locked on LSU. Let's go.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. We are free, available wherever you get podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. And as always, one of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comments below. A notably different mood vibe around today's episode as we discuss, in the literal sense, tragic news. Sometimes people misuse the word tragic or tragedy. Tragedy, in a very literal sense, involves a death. And unfortunately, that's what we're dealing with. As we all woke up on Sunday morning to the news that former LSU wide receiver Kyren Lacy has died of an apparent suicide. Jacques Doucet of WAFB television was the first with the news. Other outlets shortly thereafter were able to confirm it. LSU has since confirmed with a statement. And Kyren Lacy's father has also confirmed the news with a post on social media. So Lacy was 24 years old, and this is devastating news for a lot of reasons. And we'll kind of get into some of this here. First, what we know is that Kairen was in Houston, and apparently there will be an investigation, of course, but apparently did die via suicide. And I don't want to speak in generalities, but most suicide investigators, there's things that they look for and know what may be. I don't want to speak any further on that because there's no need to, because I don't have any further information until we have an official report released on that. But Kyren Lacy's father spoke to it as much in the statement he released, which we'll get to in just a moment. LSU did release a statement as well, which read, "We are saddened to learn of the tragic passing of former LSU football student athlete Kyren Lacy. Our thoughts and prayers are with his family and loved ones, as well as his former teammates, coaches, impacted by his passing." It's certainly notable as well that back in December, Kyren Lacy was involved in a tragic, fatal hit and run accident where he was arrested in January, where a 78-year-old man died in that crash in Thibodaux, which is Kyren Lacy's hometown. And Lacy was arrested on multiple charges, including negligent homicide in connection with that crash. He was released on bond, and a grand jury on Monday was set and scheduled to start hearing evidence in that case against Kyren Lacy. Now, I do have a news background from many years ago before I ever did sports. And one of the old adages around grand jury hearings was that a grand jury would indict a ham sandwich. And it was, in essence, a way of saying it's very easy to get an indictment. An indictment isn't a conviction. An indictment from a grand jury is just saying there's enough evidence here for this to go to trial. So it's a very low burden of proof. This isn't beyond a reasonable doubt. It's not even clear and convincing evidence or a preponderance of the evidence. This is just, is there enough there for this to warrant going to trial? And so there are many believe that there would have been an indictment and that this would have gone to trial. Now, what would have happened in that trial, I don't know. But, and none of us does. I've read the police report. I'm sure like many of you have, or at least excerpts of it. I'm sure some of you have. I have read the whole thing and what was described. I can tell you candidly that some of the conversations I've had is that there was a feeling from Lacy's defense team that was some of the traffic cam footage. It might have served to benefit Kyren Lacy's case, but in all reality now, that becomes negligent or negligible, I should say. I want to. I know there's an assumption that Kyren took his life because, I'm just going to speak very candidly now. I know there's an assumption that Kyren took his life because of the charges he was facing and the possibility of jail time and didn't want to face that. And I don't know if that's true or not. I can certainly understand how people would arrive at that assumption. I also know that we do live in a country where there is a presumption of innocence until guilt is proven. The burden of proof falls on the accuser. Otherwise, we could all just go accusing anyone of anything all the time. But I also believe this, that two things can be true at the same time, because some of the feedback that I've heard here on Sunday morning is that, well, there were victims in this case, and that's true. There's a 78-year-old man that died in that car accident back in December, and his family will have to deal with his death and no longer having him around forever. And there is no dismissing that. And had this case gone to trial and Kyren Lacy been convicted, he would have had to face punishment to the fullest extent of the law, and that would have been justified. You can acknowledge that in totality, in its reality, but then also acknowledge similarly that what's happened with Kyren Lacy taking his own life at 24 years old is a tragedy in and of itself. And now people who love him and care about him will have to live their lives wondering, could I have done something? Could I have said something? What could I have done to make this differently? And a 24-year-old man who was staring down the NFL draft later this month, his life is over. And his family and his friends and his coaches and everyone who knew and loved Kyren Lacy now has to deal with that and live with that forever. There's a couple of things that come to mind when I think about Kyren. And, some of you may know this, but one of my sponsors on my radio show is a company called Duplessis Pool Builders. And Derek Duplessis, who's the owner of that company, is an LSU grad, he's a big LSU fan. And so he's done a lot of NIL deals with LSU players. And one of them was Kyren Lacy during this football season. And part of the deliverables of that true NIL deal was that Kyren came on my show a handful of times throughout the course of the year. We even did a sit-down, hour-long Q&A, he and I, Kairen and I, on a Sunday during the football season, during the open date, during the first open date. And so I can't say that I knew Kyren well, but I did have time with Kyren, both in a one-on-one situation and others. And one of the things that stood out to me most is how much he wanted to improve. And there's one thing in particular that comes to mind. And if you remember the season opener against USC, Kyren Lacy scored a touchdown. Then he did the shotgun celebration, and it drew a flag. And subsequently, LSU was penalized. They had to move back the kickoff. USC got a short field and scored a touchdown, got him right back in the game. And Brian Kelly was incensed on the sideline. And you could tell Kyren was so apologetic and kind of pleading with Brian Kelly on the sideline. And one of the things Kelly said during the year was Kyren wants to be better, and he's working so hard at improving and maturing. And then, of course, the most famous play that Kyren Lacy will be known for during his LSU time is the game-winning touchdown against Ole Miss in overtime. And if you remember the play, Kyren caught the ball and he turned as if he was going to throw it into the stands. And he held on and then celebrated with his teammates. And I had Kyren Lacy on my radio show that week, the Monday after that game. And I asked him about that moment. And he said, what was going through my mind? Don't get a penalty. And in actuality, the game was over at that moment. The penalty wouldn't have taken the ball, the touchdown off the board. But it was progress and learning from what had happened in the season opener against USC. And I think that was an illustration to me anyway of a young guy that was maturing and progressing in his maturity, in his maturation. And that happens differently for a lot of people. Some people at 14 or 15 are forced to grow up, and some people are just innately more mature young people. And then some people, it takes time in life and life experiences. But Kyren was growing into that, and he was an enjoyable young person whenever I had the opportunity to visit with him. And no doubt he will be missed. Kyren Lacy has died at the age of 24. As uncomfortable as this may be, I am obligated to step aside for a quick break. I do want to continue, so please stay with us here. Locked on LSU, your team every day. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. There's also real easy collaboration. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared personal accounts, set goals, stay on the same page without stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. Today's show is also brought to you by Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site for the skilled trades, Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400 plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free TradeMaster program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the TradeMaster program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Kyren Lacy's dad, Kenny Lacy, posted on Facebook on Sunday, and I'll read you his statement if you haven't seen it yet, but it really is a plea to parents to make sure they check in on their children. I'll read you. It's not a very long statement, but I'll read it to you. He writes, "Young parents, start talking to your kids at a very early age and make sure they are confident and comfortable confiding in you. Don't be cool with, I'm all right, or I'm good, when you know deep down something isn't right. Mental health is real, and for the most part, it's invisible. Don't ignore the signs, even if they may seem small." He writes, "Our lives have changed forever, and this will never be okay. But God needed my baby boy more than he was needed here. This has to be the biggest pill our families have ever had to swallow. But I know the love and compassion in our families will get us through. This will never get easier, but we'll learn to live with it. Check on your kids' mental." It is a pointed message from a father who's grieving the loss of a child, which I don't think it ever really matters how old your child is. It's out of the natural order of the world for a parent to have to bury their child. And that's something that the Lacys now have to do. For Kairen, I'd probably be remiss if I didn't at least mention his football legacy, which may seem small right now, but it's something that will live on. And, I referenced a couple of times now that the conversation I had with Kairen after the Ole Miss win, the overtime win in Ole Miss, where he caught the game-winning touchdown. And, one of the things that we talked about was immortality and how that play will live on forever. For as long as people walk through the gates of Tiger Stadium and talk about LSU and Ole Miss in football, that play, that game will be mentioned. And so while Kairen is gone, and as hard as that is to believe at 24 years old, that part of his legacy will live on. I mean, he was a great receiver at LSU. He waited his turn behind Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas. He waited for his opportunity to be the guy that came in 2024, and he was fantastic. Now, Aaron Anderson finished the season as LSU's leading receiver because Kairen didn't play in the bowl game. But at the end of the regular season, Kyren Lacy was the leading receiver in receptions and receiving yards. But the moment against Ole Miss will provide him a degree of immortality, because for as long as they talk about the LSU Ole Miss series and great moments from Billy Cannon's run and the night the clock stopped, or Odell Beckham's punt return in 2013, certainly they'll mention Kyren Lacy's overtime touchdown catch from Garrett Nussmeier, along with Aaron Anderson's fourth down touchdown catch at the end of regulation. But, another part of that game that might be a bit lost in the memory is that Kyren Lacy had what looked like a devastating knee injury in the first half of that game. When he went down and his knee hyperextended, we all thought the same thing. And I asked Kairen about that in the interview I had with him the week after that game. And, his answer was that, he thought it was over, but he just kept telling himself, get up, get up, get up. He just had to get up and keep going, and he did, and it worked out fine. As almost impossible or supernatural as that may seem to be, that's his recount of it. And that's a moment certainly that LSU fans will hold and will cherish forever, is the overtime win against Ole Miss with Kyren Lacy from Garrett Nussmeier for the game winner and the walk-off. A very somber day around LSU. People that knew Kyren Lacy, that loved Kyren Lacy. I certainly continue to offer condolences to the families involved in the fatal crash back in December. I don't mean in any way for this to minimize or invalidate those feelings. But something that we've talked about here is that two things can be true at the same time. And these are two tragedies that have involved multiple families that now will go on without their loved ones for the remainder of their lives. And I know my thoughts and prayers and condolences are certainly with all of them. Okay, that'll do it for us here on this episode. As we learn more about the events surrounding and the details surrounding Kyren Lacy's death, we'll certainly have it for you here on Locked on LSU, your team every day.